We're talking truth about tolls today because there's so much misinformation out there, and we're going to set the record straight and honestly help me make a decision on what we should do about tolls here in Connecticut. With me, I have Representative Roland Lemar, who is the chairman of the Transportation Committee. Roland, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to see you tonight.
Thank you so much for being here. We always have really spirited conversations together, you and I, and tonight we're going to do it in front of the camera.
Sounds great.
So let's see how that goes. Before we begin, a couple of things I want to do is I want to introduce our viewers to the cheap seats. If you look over there, that's something that we're instituting now called the cheap seats. And what we're doing is taking people who like to razz me online, also known as online trolls, Roland.
I'm familiar with them.
Yes, and I'm giving them an opportunity to sit in the cheap seats and yell at me and tell me what they think I should or should not be doing
That's very
as
kind
their
of you.
state representative. However, we had a gentleman named Chris Kaya who was supposed to come here. He's from the Cheshire Community Forum, and he comments a lot, and I think he's really funny, but very spirited. But he hasn't shown up.
That's unfortunate.
So-
I'll have to fill that role maybe instead. I can do
you
both.
Could do that. Maybe you could do that because, like I said, our spirited conversation between us, we don't necessarily need him. But maybe once in a while we'll throw it back there and look for maybe an idea that might come out of the cheap seats, and we'll go through a rapid fire question round to see
Sounds great.
what these people on the internet are saying. But before we do that, there's something that I do, Roland, every episode, and I do something called #AskLiz. Do you want to know what that is?
I would love to know what that is.
Well, the fine folks on the Cheshire Community Forum on Facebook have put together a #AskLiz, where they ask me questions and I answer them. So what I'm doing now is I'm opening that up and taking some of those questions, and I'm going to answer them here on the show as well.
That sounds great.
So the one that we have for this episode is Jesse from Wallingford, and he asks, with all this talk about tolls, why aren't we seeing any bills which cut spending? Now, we get this all the time, don't we?
We do.
So I'm going to attempt to answer it briefly, and you just cheer me if I'm right.
Sounds great.
Okay, so Jesse, here's what happens. When we as legislators put in bills every year, we do so in the beginning of the session, and they go to their respective committees. From there, they're passed out of the committees, and then if they cost money or save money, they go to the Appropriations Committee. Now, the Appropriations Committee is one of the last committees that puts anything forward. They're the ones, right, Roland, that put out the budget.
That's right. And right now we have a governor's proposed budget, but to the point where we start cutting budget or cutting programs, that doesn't happen until far later into the session.
So I'm going to answer Jesse from Wallingford honestly, propaganda free.
That's right.
100% truth, and I'm going to say the reason why you haven't heard anything about cutting spending is simply because we're not at that point in the process.
That's exactly right.
There's going to be plenty of cutting, isn't there?
There will be a lot of cutting.
And there's going to be a lot of people upset about what we're cutting.
There certainly will be. We'll likely hear from as many people who are upset about the cuts that we have to make.
But that's the process,
That's right.
right? And so I want to make sure that everybody knows that when we do talk about what we're going to cut and what we want to spend money on, that there's a process to that too, and anybody can contact us, right?
There's a push and pull throughout the last 7 weeks of the session, and we should hear from everyone, whether you think we're cutting too much or not cutting enough. Weigh in and let us know.
Now,
Share your
this
opinion.
would have been the perfect opportunity for Chris Kaya to talk from the cheap seats, but he's not here.
That's unfortunate.
But how good does that popcorn smell?
It smells really good. I'm
Oh
gonna
my
have some.
God, I'm so hungry. I should have eaten before I came here. But so that's today's #AskLiz. If you or anyone else have any questions for me, you can get me in a variety of different ways. Go to Facebook and use the #AskLiz. You can do it on Twitter. You can email me, or you can just ring me up at my office. I'm ready to hear any questions, any feedback at any time. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's roll into tolls, shall we?
Let's do it.
Let's welcome our second guest, Mr. Scott Shepard, the policy director of the Yankee Institute.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you this evening?
I'm doing really well, and I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure. Thanks
Now,
for having me.
tell me a little bit about the Yankee Institute and your role there.
Sure. I'm the policy director at the Yankee Institute, and what we are is we're a nonprofit policy-directed think tank. We don't get involved in politics, we get involved in policy. And so our direction is free markets, free minds, free people, a free Connecticut. That's our agenda, and that's what we work for in every bill and every session.
So a lot of times people think that you are actually an arm of the Republican Party. Are you?
We are not. In fact, I'm delighted to be here today talking to two non-Republicans about an issue right before our state. We'll talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere. We'll even talk to the folks in the cheap seats, and
If
we'll
they
buy
show
some
up.
popcorn as well.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I don't know. Remember that we all need to be fiscally responsible, so we shouldn't buy too much popcorn,
true. We
right?
have to
Use a
limit our
coupon.
popcorn. That's right.
Use a coupon. So we want to get into this, and I'm going to say this again, and I'm probably going to keep saying it throughout our time together, is that this is going to be propaganda free. What we have heard time and again, not just from people on the internet, not just from those who maybe aren't involved in the process, but also from the media, has been a lot of propaganda heavy information that is not necessarily 100% truthful about tolls. Would you both agree with me on that?
Yes,
Absolutely.
So we're here to set the record straight. All right, so let's start. With that, I'm going to turn to you, sir,
Sure.
first. Can you give us a brief history of tolls in Connecticut, why we had them, why we don't have them anymore, and why we need them?
Okay, so like a lot of states throughout New England and across the nation, we developed a interstate highway system. For us, it was the Connecticut Turnpike, which opened in 1958 largely to alleviate traffic that was along the Merritt and Wilbercross Parkways and US Route 1. That opened in 1958, and it was a tolled road. Now, Connecticut, for the better part of almost 30 years, until 1985, collected tolls along that route. We had a few serious accidents. Toll booths used to be these large constructed booths where people worked.
Where
and
people
had-
take the money.
Right, you
know,
slowed down,
slow down.
you stopped in traffic, you paid a toll, you got a little card, and then you moved on to the next toll. And that happened throughout the Connecticut Turnpike. There was a serious accident in Stratford in 1983 that started in earnest the discussion about removing the tolls as a safety hazard. And eventually we ended up removing them in 1985.
Okay.
And so we'd had them for about 30 years, a little less than 30 years. They were generating about $65 million per year in revenue for
How much?
$65 million
Back then?
at that time.
That's a good chunk.
That is a good chunk.
It's a reasonable chunk.
That's a good chunk.
That's right. That is a good
All
chunk
right.
of money.
And so we removed them while a lot of the other states around us kept them up for much longer.
But we did not remove them because they were unaffordable for the people of the state of Connecticut. We didn't remove them because, and I say we, I wasn't part of the legislature at that time. I was 10. I just needed to point that out. So what they were removed because it was an emotional reaction to a dangerous situation and a tragic event, right?
Yeah, you had a robust conversation for a few years about the safety of the toll structures themselves, about with leading to congestion, people were slowing down, getting stuck in traffic, and about tourism components, about people being stuck in traffic and slowing down every time they turned around
Right.
was not great for tourism. Thankfully, tolls today don't resemble anything like that. As you
Right.
go state by state, no one's slowing down for toll booths anymore. It's not how we would do it.
All right, fantastic. And so we have some numbers there that were from back in 1985, and they're good numbers. And so do you think it was a mistake to give that up?
I think that if we're going to talk about differences between 1985 and today, we should consider all of them. We didn't have an income tax until 1991. If we want to go back to the tax and fee structure of 1985, when Connecticut was a low tax state and a tax haven, our organization is entirely in favor of that. We don't think it can be unwound that way, but we shouldn't pretend that adding tolls on top of the entire new tax structure that's developed in the meantime is just a small imposition. We also should consider that $65 million figure. We're talking about getting $800 million odd dollars out of the people of Connecticut, and that's net, I think. Gross is 1.05 billion. That's a lot more, including inflation, than $65 million. So we're talking about a vast.
Well, there's more cars on the road today too. So, but let's go piece by piece, because as we sit here at this table, we know the answers to the questions that we're asking. So I want to go slowly and bit by bit so that our viewers can understand where we're coming from, how we got here, and why we need to figure out something to do, okay? So we went through the history of the tolls. Now the question is, why do we need them, Roland?
So what we had after 1985, the removal of tolls, is a significant deficit in the amount of dollars we had available to spend on our transportation infrastructure. And we know what that looks like. We know it's bridges and roads and rails throughout our state. It's helping our local communities bond for their road network. Every year, we give millions upon millions of dollars to every local community to help them reconstruct their roadways that are deteriorating.
So just so I can point out,
Yeah.
there is, we just replaced a bridge in Cheshire.
Yep.
And in Wallingford, they just did work on one of the 100-year-old train bridges. Well, you know, I'm a little nervous about that. And there was a bridge replaced in Southington a year or two ago, which was quite fascinating. They did it in a weekend.
Right.
That was really cool. Maybe I'll try to find that video and put that on my webpage at lizlinehan.com. I'll try to find that. But anyway, sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
And when you think about it in those terms, that's 3 bridges you indicated just in this small local community. Across the state of Connecticut, we have over 300 bridges that are rated in deficient condition, over 200 of them in poor condition.
That's terrifying.
Right. And so, you know, we don't like to use tragedy or like, I don't want to scare people into like, you have to do tolls because the world's going to, no, that's not what we're talking about. But the reality is we have significant challenges in front of us because we have an older base of infrastructure that most states will eventually deal with, but we're dealing with first because we started earlier, building this road network. So with 300 deficient bridges, 200 rated in poor condition, the special transportation fund that we created to create revenue after we remove tolls isn't sufficient to keep up with that demand.
Okay, I'm going to stop you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to you. Without talking about how we're going to fill the STF, Special Transportation Fund, let's just take out one thing that Roland said, and Representative Lemar.
That's fine.
And let's see, and I just want to see if you agree with that. We have 300 bridges that are structurally deficient.
Yes.
Something needs to be done about those. Yes?
Do I think
I mean-
do I think that we should maintain our roads? Yes, I do think we should maintain
Do
our
you
roads.
think that our roads are in trouble?
I think that Connecticut's roads are pretty bad. Yeah, I think
Yeah, me
Connecticut's
too.
roads are pretty bad.
And now we have to figure out how to fix it, right?
Now we do have to
And
figure
this
out how
is-
to fix it
and so-
within our means.
Within our means, and that is what we need to talk about, right? And so there, if we even step back a little further, we could talk about the fact that our debt is very high. Connecticut has high debt. We have a history of not paying for our debt, but kind of trying to push it on out, kicking the can. We've had governors and legislators before us who thought that was the way to go, and now we're paying for it. Agree?
Agree.
Agree?
Agree.
Okay, so we're doing pretty good here so far.
So
folks.
far, so good.
Okay, so that brings us to some questions. The Special Transportation Fund, can you tell me some of those things that the Special Transportation Fund, or STF, pays for?
So, Special Transportation Fund pays for our roads, bridges, and maintenance programs. Traditionally, we'll use that to bond for large-scale projects, such as the Q Bridge in New Haven, a multi-billion-dollar bridge that was replaced, one of the most heavily congested roadways in the entire country. It costs about $1.8 billion to do that project. Or if you look on the I-84 area through the I-84 viaduct in Hartford, or the Mixed Master in Waterbury, that STF is paying for those types of programs in addition to bonding for the local bridges that you were talking about, so we
Right.
can do our LoCIP programs. And it's also paying
Tell them
for
what LoCIP is.
the local community transportation programs that we have that helps us support our local community so they don't have to go to the taxpayers on some of these large-scale transportation projects.
Now, in addition, our local town here in Cheshire, and while I don't know for sure because I don't know the ins and outs of Wallingford and Southington's budget, we also bond for our local roadways here as well. So there is the need for infrastructure upkeep everywhere. It's not just state roads.
That's exactly right. And we're helping out where we can on local roads as much as possible, particularly on bridges, which are a huge amount of money to replace, particularly in waterways that may be corrosive. The material you use and the expense of those new bridges is quite extraordinary for a local community to bear on their own.
But safety is paramount.
Safety is paramount. And we also use the STF to pay for our transit administration, running rail lines that were reducing congestion along our roadways, running bus service. STF is used in quite a few ways to support transportation initiatives across the state.
And is it used for plowing and snowstorms and salt and all that?
A little bit. So some of our money is used for the operations of our Department of Transportation, some of it's safety and roadway improvement programs, but a lot of it, most of it's going towards, that's how we bond to do the bigger projects and meet our federal requirements.
Gotcha. Okay, so now that we know what the Special Transportation Fund does, let's talk about how do we keep money in it?
Yeah, no, that's the hard part, right? Because every year we're generating a pretty stable amount of money. There's a lot of, fiction out there about how the gas tax and the STF, it's declining in revenue. That's not true.
But the numbers say, around the country say that we should prepare for that, correct?
Yes, eventually electric vehicles will play a larger role in a larger segment of our people who are driving will be using more gas-efficient, fuel-efficient vehicles, electric vehicles. So we could project over a long term a decline.
Fact check. Do you agree?
Do I agree with that?
Point, counterpoint.
Do I agree with which part of that?
Do you agree that we need to be prepared for the fact that given vehicles will be more fuel efficient and we will be moving towards electric vehicles, that there is the possibility and that experts predict that we should plan for the fact that gasoline usage will go down and therefore we'll see less revenue from the gas tax?
Well, what we've seen is flat revenues recently, and I think that we can continue to shift revenues into the transportation fund as we have planned to do, and we need to find a way to do that we can afford.
And you agree with that too, don't you?
I completely agree, yes.
Okay. All right, I'm feeling good. All right, so there have been a lot of memes. I hate memes, right? So for those of you who don't know, memes are things on the internet where they put a picture that's meant to somehow elicit an emotional response and then put 3 or 4 words that usually are completely non-factual in order to get you to believe something that just isn't true. Are we in agreement with that too?
Yes.
There are a million memes out there about tolls. By the way, my new favorite that I just saw is apparently I'm on the speaker's tolls team, and they put my picture up with blackout under my eyes, like I'm one of his football players, which you know me, I kind of like that part, and says I'm on his tolls team. However, I have never said that I am in favor of tolls. I have always said that I need more information and that I will ultimately go with what is the best thing for our state in both the short term and the long term. So with that said, let's focus on some of those mistruths that are out there that we see on memes and the internet that your cousin Larry likes to share on Twitter that might not really be the truth, okay? So first of all, the Special Transportation Fund, we hear that it is consistently rated. Is it?
It is not consistently rated. It was rated last in the 2003 fiscal year, but it has never been rated since that period of time.
Since 2003.
What will you define rated for me? Because in
Swept.
this governor's budget, there was an entirely legislated
What
plan
governor?
to
This governor?
This current governor's
Okay,
new
so
budget.
it's a plan that is not it's not law. It's not happening currently.
It is in the governor's proposal is to take a revenue stream from car sales taxes that was headed to the Special Transportation Fund out, thereby creating a giant deficit in the Special Transportation Fund that's being used as the justification for having to toll the whole state.
Okay, so I don't agree with the governor's plan to do that. Let's get that out now. I don't agree with that. However, that is a diversion and not a sweep. Let's explain the difference, okay? So a sweep is when something is in the fund and then it's like, oh God, we're short on this side, where can we take it from? That's a sweep, is it not?
That's a sweep or a raid.
Or a raid,
yeah.
Right, okay. So has the Special Transportation Fund, let's just say it again, been raided in the past?
2003 was the last time it happened, well before you or I were in the legislature.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I don't think that your constituents or the people of Connecticut care about that verbal distinction. Was there a plan to fund it? Yes. Is it being diverted to that fund being diverted in the governor's budget to non-transportation uses to create a crisis that seems to require tolling? Yes, that's true.
Okay, and so let's explore what you're saying a little bit here then. So we know that the governor wants to do this. It has not been approved by the legislature. It is not the plan. It is not moving forward at this moment. That is just a proposal. There is a distinction between a proposal and a law, correct?
Of course there is.
So let me point this out. This is something that I talk about all the time with my constituents. People can propose anything. In 2017, a legislator from, I think, somewhere up in the Danbury area, he's no longer in the legislature, he proposed that we chemically castrate individuals who commit sexual assault.
I don't think that comparing the governor's functioning budget, the budget plan that the governor proposed to the legislature, to a random bizarro bill is meaningful or effective.
It is.
All
It is meaningful in that people have to understand that anything in the world can be proposed. It doesn't mean it's passed, and it doesn't mean it's law.
But all that we can talk about tolls, which also have not passed and also are not law, the only thing that we can talk about tonight are proposals before the legislature that are being taken
Absolutely.
seriously. Are you telling me that you're not taking the governor's budget and his proposal seriously?
I am not supporting his entire budget as written. I am not. No.
Well, I will have a very hard time having a discussion with you all about bills that don't exist but might be what you support in your head. We can only talk about the things
Agreed.
that are in front
And
of the
we will talk
legislature.
about that, but what I
and
want
we
to
have
make
to
a
talk them
distinction
in the way that they're in front of the
But
legislature.
see, there is a real difference between policymakers who understand how the legislature works and people who are consistently getting information that this is going to happen just because something was proposed. It has been a real effort of mine to educate my constituents about the entire process and how it goes from idea to proposal to vote to law. And I think it's important that we point out what is an idea, what is a proposal, what is going to be voted on, and what is law. And so I don't disagree with you that the governor has a proposal to do that. That's fact. I don't disagree with you that that's not the best idea. Okay? I don't agree with the governor's plan to do that. However, it's also just a proposal. We are not even sure if we're going to vote on the governor's proposal yet, and it certainly isn't law. That's all I'm looking to explain.
And everything you said is true of tolls as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about all sorts of proposals tonight.
We are. We have to. We have to talk about what our choices are. And if you when my constituents ask me, Liz, what are the choices out there? I say there is the choice to implement tolls. There are 3 bills. Only one is going to get voted on, correct?
That's right.
And we'll talk about that. Then there's the Republicans prioritize
Oh, no, wait,
progress.
hold on a second.
Yeah.
Only one of them is going to get voted on? All 3 of them passed out of committee. Shouldn't all 3 of them get a vote on the floor?
Of course not. That's not how we do things. Routinely, in every committee, there'll be a Senate version, a House version, a governor's version, and it allows that conversation to continue. And so you try to cover as many ideas as possible so you can have a public hearing, a robust idea discussion back and forth. Our process starts so early and it ends so quickly. We're unlike other states.
Yeah.
You have to get your ideas in by the first week in January, and it has to get voted out of committee within 8 weeks, which leaves
Some less. My committee is even less than that.
That's right. Which leaves a large period of time where you can work out a lot of the details. So you have a public hearing. I want to hear from everyone. So you include as many ideas and thoughts as possible so people can indicate, like, hey, that idea has traction. That would work. Or like, that idea is terrible. We should not explore that. And so
That happens a lot.
That happens a lot, right? And because we have so many legislators introducing bills in a short period of time, we use the committee process to flesh ideas out, to take what we can, what we want to work through, and then ultimately design a final product that we can vote on before the end of session.
But now we've got 3 toll bills sitting before us. Only one is going to be voted on by the legislature. And we're trying to have a conversation with the people of Connecticut about if tolling makes sense, and if so, what sort of tolling makes sense and what the pluses and minuses would be. But we've got 3 bills, and we're hearing that we're not going to know until very, very, very late in the process which parts of what of those bills are going to make it through and what they might mean. And so if we try to have a conversation about it, we get told, well, none of those they're just proposals right now. We can't take them seriously. And yet, take us seriously when we say tolls are a good idea and what we've been selling you about 40% out of state. But all of those things are true without regard to what this bill finally looks like. That seems like an unfair process and an untruth to the people of Connecticut.
So I'll agree with you partially. It's an
Okay.
unfair process. I don't think it's an untruth. And I am open about the process at all times, and that means that I readily admit it's not the best process. And this is one of the reasons why I'm one of those legislators who is still on the fence. I don't know if I should vote for tolls, or if I should do nothing, or if I should support the prioritized progress, because the information is not there for me to make this decision. And that is something that we've discussed. It's an issue. And so one of the things that we are trying to do is kind of play scenario A, scenario B, understanding that we can go at the 10,000 foot view, and ultimately things might change when we get down to the nitty gritty, but we want to be prepared.
Well, and I think we also want to make sure that whatever bill gets passed through, the bill that gets voted on and passed is one that protects the truth of what we've been telling the people of Connecticut. If, say, we are convinced, genuinely convinced, that 40% of revenues are going to come from out of state, we ought to have provisions in that bill that make sure that tolls are conditional on a study after we get the Department of Transportation information saying that by a study done by an independent, not a pro-toll source, not CDM Smith, an independent source, that really, under whatever the Department of Transportation has authorized, 40% will come out of state. If the promises that we've been made won't, but any bill that passes should be conditional. The going forward with tolls ought to be conditional on a post hoc study that demonstrates that what we've been sold about tolls will actually turn out to be the case, and if not, no tolls.
And so I agree with you on some of those points, but I think that you're getting a little bit ahead of some of the information that we need to give our viewers so that they understand what the heck we're talking about, right? Because they're going, this guy seems to know a lot, but I have no idea what he's talking about. Let's explain a little bit of it, okay? Okay, so let's go through the process. We're not going to have just one vote and say, everyone, we're getting tolls. That's not how it works. How does it work?
Thank you. And this is why we actually go through the process that we go through, because we don't think that all of the ideas that someone had in the first week of January are the only ideas we should consider, or how a final bill should be designed. We have that public hearing process. We get out of committee, we take all of the input, we actually try to get the best bill passed by the end of session that takes into account all of the thoughts and ideas, both from committee members, that process, and from the general public, who starts weighing in once they see it. And so what we want to do is essentially say, what was the best ideas that we heard? Do we want to have this deemed approved language? And we all came out of that feeling like, no, that does not work at all. We do not want that deemed approved language. We want to make sure that legislators know what that program is going to look like, the final details of those programs are articulated well, and we know what it's going to entail and how much it's going to cost our residents. So, we need that information before I ask you to vote.
We definitely need that information, and this opens up a whole new conversation that we need to get to. We're running out of time now, so what we'll do is we're going to wrap this up really quickly, and we're going to come back with part 2 of The Truth About Tolls on Liz Linehan's News You Can Use.